Right, so we have a roving microphone. Just encourage anybody that's got a question to go ahead and prop their hand up. We'll go about 10 minutes here, and I realize we're pushing on with time, but beg your indulgence for some discussion here.
I had a question for Alicia. The polystyrene, it's pretty alarming stuff. Have you seen any research into how long-term exposure people need to that before it becomes a health effect?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The thing is that because it's an accumulative thing, it's very difficult always to attribute an illness directly to one particular source. The interesting thing about the measurement of these kinds of endocrine disruptors is that actually the testing can't be done via traditional protocols. It's done at a low dose. It has a low dose effect, so it's actually not the higher the dose, the higher the poison. It's actually the lower the dose, the higher the poison. So the difficulty is that the testing has to be done differently now in order to determine whether something is higher of risk if it's an EDC as opposed to other toxins. So therein lies the difficulty of determining again, the hazardous or toxic nature of these things. So it makes your question more difficult to answer. And as I say, it's accumulative. And so, of course, today we're exposed to a whole lot of different toxins coming from different places. And in combination, they will most certainly create issues for us in the longer term. So the more plastics we produce, the more, I guess, we're exposing ourselves to these toxins in higher accumulations, at least anyway. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't answer your question directly, but it's kind of a complex one because of the testing protocols around that.
Good evening. My husband and I have recently done a submission to the City Council asking that the city be declared free, was it? Plastic bag free? Anyway, the response is don't have the legislative power. I asked the council maybe about 20 years ago to do the same. They weren't interested. But anyway, I'm thinking that maybe we could just declare the city plastic bag free without legislation.
Thank you for that. I'd like to congratulate you for that, and I would like to push for that as well. What Caring Our Future are doing, Ari, myself, Rachel and Jen, we think we'd start small, so we're starting with George Street first in the hope that, because George Street's nice and small and we've gone to all the retailers there, and I have to say, they're amazing, aren't they, Ari? Everyone is on board, 100%. I know we've got some new retailers since we did that first sort of door knocking exercise, but everybody is completely on board with being plastic bag free down George Street, which is phenomenal. I know that particularly the Indian takeaway stores, and there's a few of them down the street, find it particularly difficult to avoid plastic bags, and they'd like our support with that. But unfortunately, at this current stage, without the R&D we'd like to see funded by the government, we haven't actually come up with the kinds of real bio bags that would meet the needs of a real plastic bag-free street. So yes, a move to paper bags perhaps, but of course it could be locally forested, sustainably forested, and then you'd also have to pay for those really too, because they're still not the best alternative. So we'd like to start small, and we again start with Palmerston North, start with George Street, and then I think by leading by example, we hope the whole city will become plastic bag free. So thank you for your efforts as well.
Question for Jonathon. I don't know if this is a valid question to ask, but do you have any figures on the costs of changing from a linear type cycle to a circular cycle, where comparing the cost of, I guess, reprocessing a used material into something that can be an input again, compared to sourcing a raw material and processing it to get an equivalent material?
No, I don't. Sorry. I found it really interesting that the figure I highlighted from the Global Waste Management Handbook report that was published a couple of months ago was the first time that, that's a really, International Solid Waste Associations a really large entity, lots and lots of money and access to research funding and things like that. So they obviously would have accumulated an understanding of the cost of status quo in terms of where we're at with globally with waste, and then had come up with that figure that it costs us 5 to 10 times more than it would to have priced in the changes that they're proposing in terms of their cluster of goals. But to be perfectly honest, I think with all the people who've got the money to do research, don't research the things that impact their business model negatively or perceived to impact it. So life cycle analysis can do some of that work, and but yeah, no, the short answer is I don't know. Perhaps I think when these things become more of an imperative, then perhaps government will fund research. The thing, I guess, that I observed, and I didn't quite get to this bit of my presentation, I'm sorry about that, was that I cited the fact that there are 16,000 universities globally. Each university is in, most of them are in cities or have city-university relationships. And that living labs model that I talked about in terms of how we can get research done without funding, because in Europe only 9% of research proposals get funded. I think the figure's similar in New Zealand. We have this massive, what's called an innovation deficit. We've got an enormous array of problems and very, very limited ability to research those and get them studied and resolved. And that model, I guess, that I've been basing the Zerost Academy in terms of my research theory, my research philosophy, is based on not waiting for some problems to get done, but try and engage students and staff in terms of real-world problem solving, embedded in local communities, and doing genuine research, but research that's integrated with the information needs of a city. And so those two projects that I illustrated were sort of in that model, and I think that's potentially a really, really powerful model for getting research and beginning to solve problems. So yeah, that's, I guess, kind of, sorry, I've spoken a little bit around that whole thing. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. Very, very difficult to get funding to solve and kind of quantify and answer those questions that you gave, which is a very, very good question. It's a really legitimate question. Yeah, so
Thanks.
Sheds a bit of light.
Other questions? Yeah, can we sort of pass the microphone forward a bit?
Trisia, so maybe we should mention Borough Washington logo, because I didn't talk about that.
Oh, okay. Do you want to speak to that? I just wanted to say that it's really important that if you do use this box to please borrow it anytime. Anyone can borrow one of these if they're shopping in Palmerston North. That's what they're there for. They're free. But the request from the group and for all the volunteers who put all their time and effort into making these beautiful bags for you to wash them and return them next time you come into town, so they're not for you to keep. We'd love for you to keep them, but they do keep disappearing and not coming back in such large numbers. And that's great too, because we know people are using them and they need them and they want them, which is fabulous because it reduces more plastic bags. But at the same time, the intention is for return and wash them. Thanks for reminding us.
Yeah, will be good.
Yeah.
Question here?
Just very quickly, I was just wondering, from what you guys would think, like our generation have been highly raised and exposed and also targeted to live in quite a disposable way. Anyone who's prepared to answer, what do you think we could do, like in our generation, to target our generation to make changes? You know?
Okay, with my job, I've found that the younger generation sort of look at me and laugh, pulling out these cloth nappies and saying that you can reuse these. It's quite, I don't know how to take it. I've been raised and raised my children to reuse and recycle as much as we can. Education, I suppose, be the thing, and just really reinforcing education. Yeah.
Because I look around here and I don't see many young people like our age coming to these sorts of things, and I think it would be, great to see more people, our age.
Yeah.
All my daughters have used have used fabric nappies that they've either made or bought. And there are, and I think it's peer groups, it's doing it in your own circles and talking about it, that kind of thing. And they do the same for pads for milk, you know, when you're to go in your bra or whatever when you're feeding, and also other options for period, that time of the month. There's some really good options as well. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that you can do in your personal life that don't mean making waste. They can be reused.
Yeah, because those are the things that I'm doing. You know, I just said to my sister-in-law that I've ordered, you know, cloth nappies, but I'm just sort of wondering what we could do to get our generation to be more aware. Like, I know I'm doing it personally, but how do we get the message out there to younger people too?
I guess that when I just talk about the zero waste lifestyle stuff, that's an underground movement, and there's a whole lot of really interesting stuff happening in the zero waste space with zero waste youth as a sort of a movement all on its own in terms of the collaborative economy, and there's some really interesting stuff happening. But the reality is, I mean, I'd love to see our government put in place to make environmentalism user-friendly, easy and the norm. But ultimately, governments can be quite difficult to change, and so I think there's real power in people just choosing a zero waste lifestyle. And I'm going to be speaking in Christchurch this weekend, and having Zero Waste Aotearoa, which is the Māori name for Christchurch, and created a zero waste network in terms of a map of all the places you can shop, and kind of like a zero waste toolkit and stuff like that. So I'm really interested to see what they're doing down there, and we'll, you know, I guess think about collaborating with the organisations down there. And I think there's some scope to kind of facilitate that. Not even if you do the really, really extreme stuff, but maybe 75% of what perhaps a real extreme person might do could be really easy and workable. And that's the kind of information I guess we've got to get out there and try and create change without waiting for government. And so yeah, I think there's lots you can do, and I personally feel really challenged myself in terms of the stuff. Just ordered the Zero Waste Lifestyle book the other day, so I'll be reading that.
Yeah. I wanted to speak to that a little bit as well, because I think that you talked at the very beginning about how wasted time is one of the few things that you can't get back, and we live in a pretty time-poor environment, and I think that's one of the biggest barriers to people making changes in their lives. Because if you've got 2 working parents and a few kids in a house and a very busy lifestyle, the concept of trying to go plastic-free is fairly overwhelming. You know, who makes the bread? Because tortillas don't come without plastic. You know, it starts at the very beginning, and I think that's huge as a community. And I think the only way to do it is to have not just nappy goddesses or godmothers, but to have something similar in all of those facets of our lives, because some of us are time poor, and there's other people who can spend their time doing those things, but if we don't have those connections in our communities, we can't do that. And it's pretty unrealistic to expect, a family where 2 people are working minimum wage jobs to come home and even have any thoughts about what the waste stream is in their homes, because that's just not going to be possible. And some of us have the luxury of perhaps having a little bit more time or a different level of commitment or ability to pay for those things. But as a community, because this isn't going to come from the top down, I think that's pretty clear, we're going to have to find this within this place. It's cool to see people here, you're right, there's not that many young faces. So how do we get the word out there? Social media is a really good way to share some of those resources.
There are some good groups on social media doing that.
Yeah, which I think is excellent. But it's very frustrating when you look around here and watch people chuck everything out, or watch, I run in the morning past 2 of those coffee van things, and it just about does my head. Watching how much waste comes out of that.
Polystyrene lids,
Polystyrene cups.
So maybe a comment from the panel on that?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that myself, having tried to go plastic free for an entire year with the family of 4 and 2, youngish boys. And it was such an eye-opener, and I think this is why I'm sort of pushing not just at community level but also at national level in terms of policy legislation, because there's only actually so much we can do because we're time poor. And because things are more expensive, and let's face it, how many of us live in families where only one of us work? Both parents almost always work because we can't afford to not. And I kind of got sick, I think, a little bit of government and other people suggesting that we should be better about our waste practices in our own homes. When I was confronted by, just a sea of consumer products in the supermarket wrapped in plastic, and even when I'm walking around the outside, which I learned to do, still found it so hard to avoid it. When I have a full-time job, my husband has a full-time job, I have 2 children, I often have boarders in the house as well. I don't have the time to go to 3 or 4 different stores, nor do I want to pay petrol for that either, by the way, and my bike doesn't take that. I can't go out and get my raw milk, with it. And so when you were talking about the community thing, yes, it has to be driven in terms of broader structures and legislation helping us to live ethically, environmentally ethically, the way we want to. But I completely agree with you that in the absence of that, we need communities to sort of bundle around us, so that perhaps we could get one person going out and getting raw milk if we choose to avoid plastic containers once a week, rather than me trying to everything back from Ashurst on the back of my bike in glass, which is terribly dangerous anyway. Or making bread, one day a week, or sharing around more of that. That would be fantastic. So more of that.
Bread circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Community, a real community.
If there's no further comment from the panel, what we're going to do is transition the discussion from the formal discussion here to a less formal discussion, because there is tea, crackers, etc. Thank you so much to Jonathon, to Pamela, and to Trisia for being part of this panel tonight, for coming here and presenting incredible insights, both at a global level and New Zealand level, and some very practical and exciting things happening locally as well, and I think pointing to some of the opportunities for local government to make some difference as well. So for me, it's been an inspiring evening. I'm sure for you it has been as well. Thank you again for choosing to make this part of the Envirofest part of your life, and do encourage you to continue that conversation. Before we break, I do want to ask you guys to join me in a round of applause. I'm told that the gift that we have to present our 3 presenters is your applause, so please do give it up.